This podcast is brought to you by Primary Intelligence, the leader in win-loss analysis, focused on helping businesses uncover the unique story on how each sales rep can win more deals.
Hey everyone, and thanks for joining me on another rousing edition of Sales Intelligence Weekly, brought to you by Primary Intelligence. I'm Ryan Queller. In most B2B organizations, the struggle to create alignment throughout your customer-centric departments, it's real. The struggle is real. We see it all the time. Sales and marketing may get misaligned on things like messaging. Product may be developing features that don't actually solve for the customer need. CX may be delivering something different than what a customer was actually sold, heaven forbid. Executives may be creating strategies and goals without real insights into your competitive position. Misalignment, it's everywhere. And when you don't create alignment, right, when you have misalignment throughout your organization, you can struggle to hit revenue goals, fail to solve customer needs, and slow business growth. I mean, the number of problems with alignment or misalignment it's just a ton. They're everywhere, and it's a problem. So let's chew on this today, right? Let's work on this a little bit. Here to talk with me today is a win-loss veteran and director of product marketing at Locus Robotics, Sophie Pagalde. Sophie, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ryan. It's great to be here.
Okay. All right, my friend, before we get into these things, everybody, knows me and they're tired of hearing about me. They want to hear about you. Our listeners want to hear about you. Tell us, who is this Sophie? Give us a little, spill the beans, my friend. Who are you? Tell us about you and your experience.
Sounds good. Thank you. So I've been in product marketing for now a little bit over 12 years, and I kind of fell into it. I became a certified product manager because I learned about this really cool framework that we could apply to a technology company I was working for at the time. And I ended up taking pieces of that and kind of putting together a product marketing type of framework that I don't think even existed at that point. Product marketing was very, very new back then. And through the years, I've really been implementing that framework. Worked at a lot of different organizations, from SaaS companies to now I'm at a robotics company. Worked on two-sided networks as well, and have been able to apply a lot of these things. And I think win-loss in particular has been a great way for me to get insights from buyers to understand who we're selling to, what we're winning, what we're losing, and then, like you said, drive that alignment that is so important throughout the organization. That really, as a product marketer, I feel is kind of my main mission, is to make sure that the entire company is really treating customers, the same way and kind of singing the same song all throughout the customer lifecycle.
So you're like a glutton for punishment, because I got to tell you, that is a tough row to hoe. Aligning the organization and how we talk about our products and with our customers, that's really hard. You've given me a couple hooks that I want to get into, but first I want to start with this. I believe, if memory serves, you've been running win-loss with Primary Intelligence at various companies. Is that correct?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
Okay. So I want to know why. Like, why did you initially decide, way back when, why did you initially decide to get into win-loss and use win-loss?
Yeah, so I've always been very curious about talking to buyers. I feel it's one of the most important things that product marketers really need to do, also product managers. When I learned about product management, one couple of quotes I think that stuck with me were, one, your opinion, while interesting, is irrelevant. Meaning that, the buyer, if you're not the buyer, you just have an opinion, right? You're not really the voice that we should be listening to. But then, I think to just making sure that we understand that, like, the interesting things are not happening in the office. The interesting things are not happening in front of our computer, thinking about solutions, but really talking to the customers and being in their world, right? And so there's this acronym that pragmatic marketing uses, that is MIHITO, and it's nothing interesting happens in the office. And I think that's so key and really critical to a company that really wants to be customer centric. You actually have to put your money where your mouth is and spend time with your buyers and understanding how they're making decisions, why they're buying, what their motivations are, and what are they looking for in a solution.
Yeah. So all I heard was mojito. I didn't hear Najito. I heard
mojito,
but no, I guess that's the wrong time of day.
Fun.
Yeah. So it's a different thing, I think, altogether. Okay. So, I love this. This is what you did. Okay, let's get into this a little bit. So why does misalignment occur? Let's get to the root, right? Why does misalignment occur in B2B organizations?
Yeah, so I think everyone has the best intention, right? Everyone is trying to drive something. Everyone has a goal, right? Every function has a goal. And, especially, with companies, and I think misalignment happens at different stages, honestly. It can happen very early in an organization where you're still kind of trying to understand what you're even doing, right? As a startup, sometimes you still don't have answers to a lot of questions. As the companies grow, misalignment can happen for other reasons, like, functions are becoming really big and kind of siloed and not talking to each other. I've also gone through a lot of mergers and acquisitions, and the other challenge is how do you bring those people together and make sure that the functions are now working together and really know who the stakeholders are as we are integrating new people and new organizations or new product lines into the business. And all of these things can create misalignment. And I think while everyone has the best intention, everyone's trying to drive an agenda in a way. And I think one of the interesting things about, product marketing is that we come very close with that every day, right? Because part of creating alignment and making sure that we're selling, we're marketing what we know we can sell and selling what we know we can deliver and delivering what we sold. This takes a lot of conversations, a lot of communication, and making sure that we're all really understanding that we have like one story that we're telling and is cohesive for the customer. And I think that's really why it's important, right? And I think it can cause a lot of issues really throughout the customer lifecycle. But again, if you go back to that buyer, the reason this matters is because their experience is, through all those stages, and they want to make sure that they can trust the organization, right? They can trust that what they saw on the website is the same story they're getting from sales, is the same product that they're getting, and that is critical, really, in customers continuing to invest in our business.
Okay, so coming back to Nahito, nothing interesting happens in the office, right? So totally get it. I've heard this before. Love Pragmatic Marketing, great company. So win-loss is only a piece, right? It's only a thing. It's not the thing. And I want our listeners to really hear that. Primary intelligence, we fully recognize that win-loss analysis, hearing the voice of your customer through win-loss analysis is only part of looking at the whole thing, right? We recognize this. It's also very important. But I want to hear from you, Sophie. Why is it important? Why is listening to your voice, the customer, from a win-loss perspective so important?
Yeah, so it informs many different functions. So, the way that we run it at Locus and the way I've been running it, I think I've actually been working with primary intelligence for maybe 8 years now. I want to say that's kind of crazy.
I'm so sorry that you've had to deal with this. No,
You've all been amazing. But I think the way that we run it is very inclusive, and we also make sure that this information makes it to the right stakeholders. So we want to build credibility with the sales team and build that tight connection. So we make sure that the sales team understands that this is not about judging them as a salesperson, but really understanding how their buyers are making decisions, because the smarter sales gets about how these buyers are thinking about solutions, are thinking about how they evaluate the solution, how they end up making decisions, is critical in how they align to that buying cycle, right? Or that buying journey, so that they can really kind of bring the customer along. And what we're seeing with sales in particular is for them to really validate that they heard the right things. We get a chance to really give kudos to the sales team and all the things that they're doing great. And then really making sure that if there's something else that comes up in the conversation with the buyer about maybe further opportunity, right, or maybe an opportunity where we can go back and clarify something with the buyer, that is critical for the sales team, especially as they build relationships with these accounts. And we also learn a lot about the competition. A lot of times we get validation about why we win, and also things to watch out for, and making sure that we are having the right conversations with buyers and addressing any objections, ahead of time. I would say, from a product perspective, we've been able to justify some decisions around, acquisitions, around, the products that we're developing, how we're thinking about the solution and new functionality, because we hear from the buyer directly not just what they're seeing from us and what they like more from us, but also what they're seeing elsewhere that is making them evaluate, other vendors as well. And, from a customer success perspective, it's interesting. We actually we're very committed to customer success. And so we really involve, those stakeholders in conversations early on in the sales cycle. And we get incredible feedback about, how we really take the customer's business case, and we understand what they're looking for and kind of that ROI that they're looking for. And we had incredible feedback too in terms of the customers really trust and faith in what we're going to be able to deliver later as well. So we're able to provide, great feedback to the customer success organization. I actually had today one specific case where we were reviewing a deal that we got through primary intelligence. It was a win. And part of the reason we won is that we could tell the customer exactly when they could go live, and we could meet a deadline that no other vendor could have met. And having that, basically the customer called us a unicorn because we were able to deliver that. And that is a great piece of information to send back to, our customer success organization that's killing themselves to make these deadlines, right? Who's working so hard, and it's motivation for them to realize their part in the cycle as well.
Okay, so I have several things to unpack, but I want to get to this point right that you just made right here. So I love that you found that feedback from the customer about delivering on a certain. That's amazing. That is amazing. You said you leveraged it by taking it back to the team that's killing themselves to make it happen.
Yeah.
How else from a product marketing perspective might you leverage that kind of feedback, that kind of information?
Yes, in this case, it actually validates something that we've known and we've seen, but it kind of gives us, one more time that validation and that quote from a customer, right? Which is the way that we think about time to value, and the way that we think about those short, implementation times that get the customer to their ROI faster is critical. It's one of our core differentiators, honestly. And again, like no other vendor can do this. And so the fact that a customer recognizes that, and that is the reason why they decide to sign, on the dotted line with trust that we're going to be able to deliver that is huge for us. Okay.
Now, at the beginning of your last statement, you talked about getting the win-loss information into the right hands of to the right stakeholders.
Yeah.
So this show's about alignment, right? So how do you know? You've been doing this for a while, win-loss for a while. You've probably seen almost every scenario that's out there. How do you know what stakeholder to take the information to first? And then I have a follow-up question. How do you do that? Like, how do you actually get it to them? So let's start with the first one.
Yeah, so I would say that I take a pretty broad approach, right? So one thing that I will say is I do have these individual conversations with sales to make sure that we debrief on every deal once we get the feedback from the buyer, so that we also can kind of take note on the other side of the story, or anything that we may have missed, or something else that they may have heard that maybe the buyer didn't go in depth into. So that is kind of step one. And again, it's also kind of building that trust with sales that we're taking care of your customer, that, we're going to share the feedback with you first. And that builds a great relationship with sales. We also, like I said, use the kudos, anyone who's mentioned by a customer, to really recognize people and make sure that everyone, through the executive, up to the executive team knows how that person made a difference and what best practices they're using, right? Whether it's sales or customer success, what best practices they're using that are really helping us win, because those best practices can then be implemented throughout the organization. Other sales reps may want to do something that one rep is doing really well, same thing with customer success. So that is critical. But then I will say too that, I also do quarterly updates that are very inclusive. So we have a group of about 60 senior leaders and executives in the company. Every quarter, I do a full update on win-loss and everything that we're learning for that group. And that information goes also all the way up to the board of directors. And the reason, I've kind of built it that way is, one, I sold the program from the very beginning to the executives first and got that buy-in before I went and implemented it. So they were already expecting an outcome from that. And when I explained to them the possibilities, they became very interested in what this could do for us. And then giving those updates really validates the value of the program. It also keeps the executive team informed as to where we're seeing some gaps, how we're being perceived in the market, again, how buyers are making decisions, what competitors are coming into deals that we need to watch out for. And it helps us improve our messaging and the way we think about, where we kind of fit in our market.
Okay, so love the quarter. That is a best practice, by the way. The organizations, the people, the Sophies of the world that are on a quarterly basis taking and kind of sharing key findings and then actioning on that's best practice. And the organizations that do that get the most from this. I'm very curious, and this is where it varies from organization to organization that we work with. You don't have to give me the details of what's shared, but what's the type of information that you take back on these quarterly basis? I mean, there's so much that you can glean from win-loss. What do you do to narrow that? And what's the type of information you share?
Yeah, so one of the areas is buying criteria. So we're always looking at how customers or buyers are rating us against the competition on their key buying criteria. And part of the reason we do this is because the way we build our positioning is based on how we can position against that buying criteria. We're always looking at how our competitors, positioning against that and how do we position against that. Because we feel like then we can really align with the buyer in terms of what they're looking for in the solution. And so that's one area where we always go deep into. The other area is competition. So anything interesting that we've learned about the competition. And I'll tell you one interesting thing that I do in terms of competition too, is we take these win stories against the competition and we put them into our battle cards. And it's basically a summary win story. And what it does is it gives the sales team these stories they can tell. And even if they can't mention the customer, they can say, we had a customer just like you. Let me tell you about some of the reasons they decided to go with us versus someone else. And it gives them like a real story they can tell. And then, I link to the report in Primary Intelligence where they can go and read the full transcript so they can, find any more information, but we give them that summary that they can arm themselves with. And then, we also look at pricing, how are we comparing against the competition? That's not what we compete on, but it's always interesting to kind of see. And then I will tell you that what our executives especially absolutely love is the quotes, right? The transcript. So
everybody loves the quotes. Everybody loves the quotes.
Yes. Well, because that, you can almost feel, right? Like what the buyer is trying to communicate with that. And even having the ability to play that, with the tone of voice, with the excitement from the buyer, or, the concern from the buyer sometimes too, because we also lose deals. But having that voice of customer is critical, and also making sure that everything that I'm presenting to them in terms of findings, I always have those quotes to back it up, because what I find is that that's when everyone in the organization can really connect to it, right? It's not just a chart that shows why we win, but it's anecdotes and what the customer really said about why we won, or why we lost as well, right? Like what were they telling us? Is not just a bullet point on a slide, but there's a story behind it that we want to make sure that everyone understands.
Okay, so let's continue down this path of socialization and insight sharing. At the end of the day, win-loss is not about data acquisition, it's about creation of insights, right? So it's about insights that you then use to act, right? It's always to act. If you don't act with the insights, it's data, and just stay at home. Don't waste your time with it because it's not going to be helpful.
Yeah.
Many people that run win-loss struggle to socialize their win-loss program insights, right? Their buyer insights, and get others to then internalize them and, internalize those insights that win-loss uncovers. Why? Why do you think it's hard for people to internalize win-loss insights?
That's interesting. I wish I knew, because if it's about fear, I'm the opposite. I'm completely fearless about this, right?
I kind of get that. That from you. Yes. Fearless. Yes.
So, I think it's, to me, it's always about finding that opportunity where it can help us make a decision or validate a decision. I'm not sure why you wouldn't share that, to be honest. To me is, why wouldn't you share it every week, right? That's more the question, because it's so rich. And what I'm finding is, yes, we can look at the individual interviews, and there's so many insights there in terms of what we need to act on. And I will tell you that in each one of these debriefs, I include the rep that closed the deal, their director, and also our chief revenue officer. And the reason I do this is because I want to make sure that, if there's something that is getting us at any stage in the sales cycle, that we immediately remove that obstacle, right? And there's so much value in that. There's also kind of that other layer of informing the executives of kind of these trends. But then, being able to search through that data too has been incredibly valuable, because sometimes I hear, okay, product is working on something, and then I can do a quick search for that word and be like, oh, is this something that customers are mentioning, and then I can come up with a full report of this is all the things that our customers have said about that. And I'll tell you, this helped us specifically with a recent product launch, and specifically with an acquisition we did last year, where we had quote after quote after quote of customers saying, this is what I want to see from Locus. And it is incredibly powerful. And so I would say, to me, like, also having that repository of the data that we can go mine is incredibly important. I honestly can't even tell you why you wouldn't use it.
That's totally fair. Okay, so for our listeners that don't know, Primary Intelligence we have our tool. It's called TruVoice, and the data repository that Sophie's describing lives in TruVoice. Personally, I think TruVoice is an amazing tool. It's super robust, and we're going to talk about the pros, the good, and the bad, the ugly, right? So we're going to get it all out there here in a second. But you just mentioned one specific thing, that you can search a word and go find. Tell me about that. Tell me about your experience with. We call that search feedback, right? So tell me about your search feedback experience.
Yeah, so I'm not going to share specifics, but basically there was a weakness that was coming up in the sales cycle where we were hearing this over and over and over again. We knew that this is something that, where we needed to really accelerate our roadmap, because we already had kind of mapped out how we wanted to address that. And in some ways we need to address it. And in some other ways, we also want to make sure that the customer understands that our approach is slightly different. So when they're comparing apples to apples with competition, our solution just works different, right? So I would say it was a combination of saying, okay, how do we reposition and make sure that we're messaging things the right way? So the customers understand it's not fully a gap, it's just a different approach. But then also we're addressing their concerns in terms of where there is a true product gap that we need to address. So, it was really a matter of kind of searching through a few of the keywords that we knew, they were probably mentioning. And then I created kind of a report on, here's everything that they've said. Here's some of the themes that we're hearing, and this is where the opportunity is, right? It's not just let's plug this hole, right? That's not what it's about, but really, how do we create an opportunity from this? And how can it help us really expand, our solution set and how we work with customers if we address this need that our customers are saying they have.
Okay, I love that. That's phenomenal. Okay, you've just given us a kudos, a positive for TruVoice. Okay, let's go and we've also talked about a lot of positives with win-loss. As a veteran, you actually sit in kind of a very unique situation where, 8 years of doing win-loss analysis, you've seen, again, the good, the bad, the ugly.
Yeah.
What's hard? Like let's just be real for a second. What's difficult about win-loss analysis, doing this for an organization?
Yeah, so I will say one of the hardest things to overcome is to get the sales team to buy in. And there's many reasons why that's hard. This is their customer that they just closed. They feel vulnerable with the deal. If they won, they want to make sure they're not going to change their mind. If they've lost, they're worried about what the customer may say about that. So, that is something that definitely has taken time to build trust, to make sure the sales team understands the purpose of these interviews, to make sure they understand that they're going to be the first ones to hear the feedback, that comes from the customer, to make sure they understand that we're going to take care of them really through the process. And I have to tell you, can I just speak about one quick win on this? Because last week was amazing. We actually had a salesperson it was actually a sales director that just joined the team. I had to bring him up to speed quickly within a couple of weeks, got him on one of these debrief calls. And the amazing thing was that this was his first debrief, and he was like, at the end, he was like, this has been amazing. And before this, I got a call from the customer thanking me for taking the time to listen and thanking me that for, the fact that Locus really cares about their experience. And it was incredible, because that kind of closed the deal in terms of having that sales, director on board, that this is a good thing for the customer as well. So, again, like, just how do we sell to the salespeople, right? How do we sell to them that this is a good idea? That's critical. And I will say that, for us, we had a very manual process initially at Locus, and it was working well. And then we decided to automate, and that did not work for us. Honestly, it kind of became this thing that maybe I'll do if I want to, and it was really easy to click that button to say, yeah, don't send the request. And so we just went back to saying, no, let's just do this manually, make sure that, again, the sales team feels like there's this warm handoff, that we're not dropping the ball or sending some random email to someone. And I will tell you that in the last week we submitted like 13 candidates or something, to like, I think it was like within 24 hours, as soon as we switched back to this manual process again, because it just builds more trust with the team, and it helps us make sure that we're really taking care of each individual customer in a specific way. Like, for example, we're going global now, and we do have to do interviews in other languages. And, making sure that we know what language to approach the customer in has also been, something that we have to be careful about.
Okay, so you just mentioned something else just now, the global research level. That is a complex animal by itself. I mean, how do you address that? How do you address the various cultures, the various ways of looking at giving feedback or receiving feedback? How do you deal with that in a global situation?
Yeah, so I will tell you that having a vendor like Primary Intelligence is critical for me because of the scalability, right? There's no way that me and my team could do all the interviews that we want to do, and especially with all the different time zones, the languages, all these different things. So I will say that having, you guys help me with that has been critical, and being able to translate, because at the end of the day, the more global we become, the more we want to understand different perspectives, right? And buyers in North America do not behave the same as in Europe.
Not the same thing. Yes.
Not the same at all. They make decisions different ways. Things matter to them in different ways. The buying criteria may be different. The competition is different. And so we really are trying to take this approach where we really want to we focus on the region and really understand the nuances. So, because at the end of the day, you're selling to a person, right? You're selling to someone who has a culture, who has, a way of thinking. And, we're very fortunate to have people locally who are doing the marketing, sales, implementations. And what we also want to, give insights to them that are relevant, right? If we're just giving them insights on what's happening in North America, not always is that going to be helpful for them to help us build our business in Europe, for example.
Okay. So one of the key words, my antenna always go up when I hear the word trust. Trust is, it is a root or a foundational or a necessary environment to have in order to win at your business. Full stop. I believe this inside of me. How does win-loss either help or hurt that trust? And I do mean help or hurt, because I could potentially see either way happening. What's your experience with win-loss and analysis, the feedback that you get from the buyer, and how that either helps build trust or helps erode trust?
Can I ask, do you mean externally or internally?
Internally.
Or both? Internally.
Let's start. Yeah. Well, I would actually, that's a great point. Let's hear both. I would love to hear both.
Yeah. So, I would say internally, again, like when we get a call like this rep got, where they were thanking him for caring, enough about their opinion to go through this process, and be able to provide feedback. I think those kinds of things really build trust, right? The buyer feels listened to, they feel like we're caring, we want to make sure that we're doing the best thing, that we're open to what they have to say about what we may do better. So I think that's critical in terms of building that relationship with the buyer. And I think also, what you want to make sure too is that you're following up on that, right? If there's feedback that the customer says, I'm not sure about this, or I have questions about that, or, I don't know if you approach this the best way, that we're really following up and kind of owning it and making sure that either we're clarifying or we're working with the buyer to make sure that we're kind of closing that loop, right? Otherwise, the trust that you may have built in that process, you lose immediately, right? Because there's no follow-up, no action on it. So we make sure that we follow up on things, when we go through that debrief, like we make sure that we take notes of anyone that needs to be communicated, it needs to address something, and then we communicate internally. So I think that's critical. I think internally, again, like just kind of how that feedback is handled is also being watched, right? Everyone is trusting, the salesperson is trusting us with their customer, their newly closed deal that they don't want to lose. And, we want to make sure that we're taking care of that and they understand, they have visibility into the process. And then, we've also learned that there's certain feedback that maybe someone in the organization needs to see before we get the okay to share with the rest of the organization. There's information that sometimes is sensitive, and handling that the right way with the right stakeholders and the right people so that it's addressed appropriately is important.
So you just touched on a subject that's really important to me these days, and I'm seeing this in the market more and more, both from an employee perspective. Employees are looking for this, and also employers, and that is this idea, this sense of taking care of one another. Mm-hmm. There's just not enough of that. There's really not enough of that in the world. And in a previous episode, we had another customer talk about the dangers of weaponizing win-loss analysis. Like, do not do that. How damaging that could be. And at the end of the day, win-loss, from my perspective, the organizations that I've seen that really drive trust, that create uplift, are the ones that do it with the intention of taking care, right? Mm-hmm. Taking care of one another, taking care of the salesperson, taking care of product, taking care of marketing and messaging, product marketing, down the list. Mm-hmm. How do you ensure that you can that you communicate the intention of mm-hmm. that win-loss, that taking care of the people internally that they're receiving feedback about? How do you do that?
Yeah, so I think it's a lot of visibility. First of all, like I said, I think just giving people visibility into what the process looks like, how we're going to collect this information, how we share it. I actually have a call with every new salesperson that joins the company where we walk them through, the different things that product marketing does, and win-loss is one of them, because we want them to buy in from the very beginning and see where the data is going to be reflected before they send their customer through. So that is important. I forgot your question.
That's okay. No, what I was asking is specifically about how do you ensure that you communicate that you're taking, this is not designed to be a weapon, to be a stick to beat somebody with, but it's designed to actually help take care of, everybody in the organization.
Great. So another aspect is, I'm a product marketer, so we're good at positioning and messaging things. And I think just the way you position and message, the program, also the way you position and message the feedback matters, right? We're very thoughtful about how we curate that information and how we present it back to the organization. We try not to present problems, but maybe say, here's some feedback, here's some potential solutions, here's some ideas. So really how you communicate matters all throughout, from the introduction of the program all the way through the execution to, then being able to share that information back into the organization.
Okay. So one thing that we do at Primary Intelligence is we gather, really a ton of information. Specifically, we do survey, and then we do live in-depth interviews, right? And the survey, we typically measure 4 categorical areas versus the top competitor. You've got, mm-hmm. how did we do against the competition in price, sales motion, product or solution, and the company perspective. Mm-hmm. And then we go deeper in the in-depth interview. We gather a lot of information. Yeah. You have disparate organizations that have, like you said at the very beginning, that have their own agendas. Now, that's crazy talk, but it's true. Everybody has their own agenda, right? Yeah. Sales has an agenda, marketing has an agenda, so on and so forth. How do you share the different insights? How do you determine what insights are either relevant or apropos or impactful for the different departments?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's really about empowering the organization. And I know that that word is overused, but, what can we provide back to the organization that is going to help us make a decision, validate a decision, help us improve it, improve on, or I should say, maybe operationalize the best practice. So it really is always about how this is going to help us, right? And so we're always looking at, what are the things that we're doing well that we can do better, and what are the things that, again, we can more broadly do, or what are the things that we need to improve, right? And always looking at it from the lens of, this is constructive feedback for us to take and turn around and do better. And I do think that for a win-loss analysis program to be successful, you need an organization that has that attitude of continuous improvement, and doing better, right? You need to care about the customer. You need to want to do better. Otherwise, it falls flat because there's nothing for that data, to do. But I can tell you that at Locus, we're very committed to success, like the customer success. And so for us, it's gold, right? It's everything that we hear from the customer that we can go act on, again, to do more of, or to improve in any way. Then we want everyone to know about that. So I would say I always have that lens of, where are some areas where we can do better. And then the other thing is, I'm always kind of listening to what the teams are concerned about. What is keeping them up at night? What is that agenda, but also why is that agenda what it is, right? Like, what are they trying to
That is great. I love that question. Why the agenda? Yes, yeah. Sophie, good.
Because they have goals that they have to meet, right? They've committed to something that they want to do. And so, always listening to what are people concerned about, and then being able to bring any insights that we find that can help them clarify or keep moving in a direction, or, maybe tweak is always helpful.
Okay, we're rounding third here. We're almost done with our conversation. You have been unreal, just beautifully shared and articulated best practices, ideas, watch outs, what's good, what's bad, all of that stuff. It's fantastic. How, from your experience, two last questions. First, in your experience, how has win-loss created alignment for you in your organization?
Yeah, so one of the things that I've been driving at Locus since I started was making sure that we're clear on what our position is in the market and how we differentiate. And sometimes people feel like that's marketing speak, but it's not. The way you position and the way you message, like, it has to align with what we deliver. And so we've gone through a lot of positioning exercises that are really cross-functional. I like making sure that all the right stakeholders are involved in pretty much anything that we do. But then, I think win-loss has helped us validate a lot of those things, and then understand, like, I feel like at a more real level, why this matters to the customer. So again, it's not just words on a pretty marketing slide. It's actually something that we live and breathe, right? Like I was saying that example where, the reason we want to drive this quick timeline, right, in terms of implementation, is because it impacts the customer ROI. And that's one of the main reasons they choose us, because that's one of the things that matter to them, right? And so it's not just an idea. It's something that we need to live as an organization. And when the entire organization over and over and over hears these customer stories that tell us why those things matter, everyone wants to go deliver on them. And I think that's just alignment that, honestly, it kind of runs in the background, but it makes us all realize that these are the things that we can never miss. These are the things we need to deliver on.
Okay, that was awesome. So last question for you, my friend. If you could leave our listeners with one final thought, any piece of advice. Let's say you're sitting down over a nice, soccer game between Brazil and Argentina, and you're enjoying some dinner, maybe a glass of vino, I don't know, just enjoying your time. What advice would you give to somebody about win-loss analysis and alignment? What would you tell them?
Yeah, so I would say, especially for product marketers out there, own being the voice of the customer. And I think there's many ways to get there, but if you want to be the voice of the customer, you actually have to bring the voice of the customer to people. You can't just take that information and keep it to yourself. That's when you ask me that question of why would you not share, or I can't even imagine, right? Because to me, it's one of the most incredible resources in terms of driving alignment. Again, like backing up everything that we do, tying it back to why it matters to our customer. And at the end of the day, we're really aiming to be a customer-centric organization. We are one, but to continue to be one, especially as we grow, we have to be committed to listening, and we have to be aligned with that voice of the customer.
Sophie, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. We loved having you on the show, and moreover, we've loved having you as a client for all these years. You really are a champion of win-loss analysis. You're crazy professional, and we love seeing the impact that win-loss analysis has had at each of the companies that you've implemented it at. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Ryan. It's been so fun to talk about this. I'm truly passionate about it, so it's been super fun.
I can feel it, sister. I can hear it. For more on primary intelligence and Locus Robotics, check out the show notes at primary-intel.com/podcast. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. We'll see you next time. And listen,